Hey, what's up? Nico DPS here once again, and today I have a very interesting video to go over with you guys. I received a document that contains possible balance changes in the upcoming patch 3.19, or as the new season is going to be known as Lake of Calandra. I will preface this with saying that this is not an officially released document by GGG. This has not been officially confirmed by GGG, but after reviewing this myself, a lot of these changes were absolutely expected from the community and other content creators. Speculations around what's going to be nerfed, such as Nightblade, Aegis, Aurora, things of that nature, as well as there's some more obscure mechanics that were nerfed as well, which kind of lends to it being a pretty legitimate source, whoever created this document and leaked this document. So to me, it's mostly believable, and I'd like to go over it with you guys. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so let's just start from the top and work our way down. Up first, as a surprise to absolutely nobody, is Nightblade is getting a nerf. Essentially, the crit damage from the elusive effect is getting removed. So if we go over to the skill gem over here, a PoE wiki, supported skills, elusive from supported skills also grants X amount of critical strike multiplier. That is going bye-bye. This is an expected change. This is what was speculated by a lot of the community and content creators. And essentially, you're just not going to be able to obtain upwards of 1,000 critical strike multiplier with min-max gear, which is pretty ridiculous. Most people struggle to get even 500% critical strike multiplier. So no surprise there. Reasonable change if you ask me, even as a melee enjoyer myself. Up next, we got Lightning Strike. The single attack of Lightning Strike now only damages a single target once. So I think what this is just going to mean, well, I say just, but what this means is essentially the damage potential on bosses for Lightning Strike and very large tanky mobs is going to be cut in half, if not more, especially when you take into account the Nightblade nerf. So there is essentially two damage sources that you can have from Lightning Strike when you're hitting a boss or a big mob, something of that nature. If you position yourself properly, the melee strike, which is the bolt that comes down from the ground, will hit them, as well as the projectiles then will hit them as well. That is no longer going to be able to be a possibility. So essentially our damage is cut in half just from this nerf alone for bossing, which is a bit disappointing to say the least. I'm unsure if that was an intended mechanic in the first place from them. I would assume no, and that's why this is happening. But I think it was actually a very reasonable thing to be happening considering the state of most melee skills in the game. It was one of the very few that allowed some very good bossing and mapping potential all around. Very strong, very good, very fun to play. That's getting gutted, which is very unfortunate. Still be good for mapping, but for bossing, wow, it's going to be painful now. Up next, we got Tornado Shot. So this is a translated document, by the way, so some of the verbiage in here is going to be quite odd. This is one of them. Tornado Shot's number of mother arrows is now fixed at 1. And all attributes that increase the number of projectiles now only increases the number of child arrows. So your main projectile is now going to be capped at 1, and any source, whether it be GMP, LMP, volley, anything that affects your projectiles is now only going to affect your secondary projectile or your child projectile, which is extremely unfortunate. With more of the nerfs that are coming down below, I essentially assume that Tornado Shot is completely gutted and will not be played or not be viable anymore. You'll see later. This is extremely disappointing. I also love playing Tornado Shot, as you can see in my previous videos. That was the build I was playing, Omni Tornado Shot. I do agree it was quite powerful, but I don't think it was unnecessarily powerful, especially considering things like Forbidden Right, which, go figure, is not mentioned at all in here. Big surprise there. So Tornado Shot, bye-bye. Find something else, I guess KB or nothing when it comes to wanting to do speedy Deadeye mapping. At least that one didn't get touched, but that's extremely disappointing. In my opinion, it's done, it's gutted, but I could be wrong. You never know. Next up, we got Explosive Arrow. Explosive Arrow stacks against monsters for different Explosive Arrow ballistas are now calculated independently. So essentially what I believe this means is the Explosive Arrow stacks, you can no longer stack them up via your ballista totems and your character Explosive Arrow. Now they're going to stack separately. I would assume that's a big nerf. I personally have not played Explosive Arrow, but those who have, correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong, but I would assume that's a pretty substantial nerf, and that sucks as well. Next up, we got the split effect of Sniper's Mark now has a trigger cooldown of 0.5 seconds. So what this means is the split portion of this projectiles which hit cursed enemies split towards 3 to 4 additional targets. That is now going to have a 0.5 second cooldown, which is in line with the Mana Flask and Life Flask charges gained down here. On its own, doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when you count in everything else that's getting nerfed, that is just another nail in the coffin for Tornado Shot especially. Up next is Fire Trap. The dot of Fire Trap has been slightly reduced from 4170 to 3188 at level 20. I wouldn't call 25% damage slight, but there you go. And the base duration has been reduced from 1.75 to 1.25, so pretty significant base duration nerf as well. This, although I don't play Righteous Fire or any other build that takes advantage of Fire Trap at the moment, to me this is pretty disappointing because it allowed something like Righteous Fire to actually scale their damage pretty well and give them a lot of single target damage for bossing. It allowed you to actually boss at a reasonable pace. So this just nerfs that significantly. I'm sure it's still doable, still possible, but it's a nerf that I feel is unnecessary once again. Next up, number 7 here. Now all summoned skills have an additional attribute. The explosion damage of the summoned is reduced by an additional 60%. I would assume this has to do with like summoner, like specters and skellies and all that stuff. I would assume this is what it has to do with. And the explosion damage of summoned is reduced by additional 60%. Whatever this means, a reduction of 60% is a substantial nerf. So if you can decipher that better than I can, whatever that is got nerfed by 60%. Unfortunate. All right, so that's out of the way for skills. Now we can go into ascendancy changes. And up first with the nerf bat is champion. So this first one actually isn't too bad if you ask me, but champion sublimation, aka the champion node fortitude, has been reworked. Now when your melee attack hits a monster, you will gain the maximum fortify effect for 10 seconds. So essentially what this means over here, let me pull up my POB. Sorry about that. So we got a POB over here for the champion node. We got fortitude right here. It just says you have basically permanent 20 fortification. Now you have to hit an enemy to get that effect for 10 seconds. Not too big of a deal all around, but you no longer have permanent fortification. So there you go. Up next for champion as well, the inspiration node increases the effect of non-curse aura skills has been reduced from 30% to 20%, so a 50% nerf there, or sorry, a 33% nerf there. As well as banner skills have no retention effect, aka banner skills were essentially free on your mana reservation. Now it just makes them to where they have 100% increased mana reservation efficiency, similar to the mastery that you can get on the skill tree. So for inspirational, that is a pretty hefty nerf. I'm not too surprised by the aura effect nerf, but to make banner skills, just take that and remove them from being free and instead just have 100% reduced mana reservation efficiency. A little much if you ask me, but it is what it is. Okay, continuing on, we got Sharp Eyes, aka Deadeye, Unlimited Ammo, aka Endless Munitions, has been reworked. Now your equipped projectile skills are assisted by level 10 advanced multi-projection. I believe that is LMP, which also gives you 2 additional projectiles, but at the cost of reduced projectile damage. So this is a net nerf, and once again, just another nail in the coffin for something like Tornado Shot, which received what's likely to be a massive nerf up top. So another reason to just stop playing it altogether next season. Very unfortunate. It was one of my favorite skills in the game. Damn. So once again, another Deadeye notable here. Focus Point, that's actually Focal Point, has been reworked. Now, when the attack hits a rare legendary enemy, it will trigger a level 30 Sniper's Mark with a cooldown of 4 seconds. If the enemy is killed by you, the surrounding enemies will deal less damage to you, reduced by 25%. After the mark enemy is defeated, your spell is transferred to another enemy. So basically, if we pull up Focal Point right here, since they said it was reworked, if it was going to keep the increased effective marks, they would have said so. That means you're losing 75% increased effect of your marks. And now it's on a cooldown of 4 seconds when you hit a rare or unique enemy to then have the reduced damage taken and the spread. So definitely a massive nerf once again. Deadeye is just, if these are actually true, Deadeye is just getting gutted. If you ask me, this is a bit ridiculous. I don't see why they're going this hard on it. I guess it's in line with them wanting to reduce the speed of the game, and Deadeye was absolutely one of the faster ascendancies in the game, but what can you do? Okay, now that we're finally finished with Deadeye and it being gutted, we can move over to Raider. So after a little bit of thinking here, I think this reduced elemental abnormal status avoidance of Ascendant Veiled Goddess from 50% to 35%. So what I think this actually is over here in the Raider tree, Avatar of the Veil, the 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments is now going to be 35 while you have phasing, right? Honestly, to me, this is somewhat reasonable. I don't think it's too big of a deal. It's pretty easy to get ailment avoidance via your boots and chest piece and implicits. Also, just being a Raider, you have permanent phasing, and you get an extra 35%. That's really not that big of a deal. It's going to allow you to still achieve it with one veiled roll on your chest and then a loathing roll on your boots. So to me, not that big of a deal, and I am a avid Raider enjoyer. My Tornado Shot character is actually a Raider at this point, so I don't think it's too big of a deal myself, but people might think differently. Now, the magic damage suppression from Key Sublime Quartz Incarnation, aka Quartz Infusion, has been reduced from 40 to 32%. So essentially, in Quartz Infusion, instead of having 40% suppress, you're going to get 32, but it seems like you still keep the phasing. So a little bit of a nerf, but nothing too crazy. As a Raider or as a Ranger in general, obtaining suppress isn't that hard to begin with. So really, I think it's more of a nerf towards people who are using the Forbidden Flesh and Flame combo, but still not too bad. Just as a Ranger, you can obtain suppression everywhere, so nothing too crazy there. Up next, we got each critical shot of Mistress Sublimation Forbidden Power can reduce the area of effect expansion from 6 to 4% and the damage from 6 to 4%. So what this actually means, as far as I can tell, is up here in the Occultist tree, the Forbidden Power notable, and now is getting reduced from 6% to 4%. That's really all that seems to entail. Occultist is Occultist is an extremely powerful ascendancy, and it seems somewhat reasonable to nerf it, so no surprise there. I'll call this one reasonable. Next up, Mystic Ascension Path to Bone, no longer immune to chill and freeze effects because Russia has stopped gas supply. So this is maybe a little bit of a meme that the people over in the Chinese client balancing Path of Exile are doing. But if this is actually true and not just a meme, what this means is Frigid Wake no longer going to allow you to be immune to chill and freeze, which I think is a bit uncalled for, although it's not impossible to obtain anyways. So take it as you will. Even with Occultist being a pretty powerful ascendancy, I don't think this was what needed to be nerfed. Next up, Arcanist Sublimation. Death Rattle of Obscene Words has been reduced from cursed enemies and your minions have a 40% chance to explode down to 25% chance. So what this means is, once again, in the Occultist tree, Profane Bloom getting reduced to 25 from 40%. Okay, what do we got next here? We got Summoner's Sublimation. Okay, Summoner's Sublimation Devotion Demon has been reworked. Now it is the dedication skill that automatically triggers the equipment every 5 seconds, and the effect of the dedication skill is increased by 30%. Now, I don't play Summoners. I actually never have really past like level 30, but after doing some digging here, what I think this actually means is, where did it go? I think this is Mistress of Sacrifice, and they're reworking it. And so instead of offerings, I think this actually just means offerings, right? Dedication skill, offering skills automatically triggers whatever equipment for 5 seconds, and the dedication skill is increased by 30%. So if we look at offerings, you probably get reduction to 30% from 40%. That's essentially what I can get from that. They're reworking a little bit, but I think that's the node that's going to get removed. Sorry if I'm wrong. I do not play Necromancer often. I'm just trying to relay the information and also discern the translated text here. Okay, so up next we got Inquisitor. Inquisitors, the Holy of Holies and the Way of Lianjian has been reworked. So right here, what they are talking about down here is Inquisitor, Sanctuary, and Pious Path. It's been reworked now. And the sacred place, which is consecrated ground, when you stand, will be generated on your feet, and the effect of consecrated ground is generated will last for 4 seconds. God, I'm stumbling around everywhere right now. I'm very sorry. Doing my best here. And then the Way of Lianjian is now 50% increased consecrated ground effect you create, and consecration's health generation effect is applied to energy shield. Other health regeneration effects no longer benefit energy shield. So this is definitely a nerf. What I can tell is they're moving some of this around everywhere, but most of it stays the same, other than the fact that now when it also applies to your energy shield for like life regeneration from what consecrated ground gives you, it now makes every other form of energy shield regeneration not effective, which I think is a pretty big nerf, considering a lot of people, you know, do some pretty big hybrid life and ES builds with Inquisitor. So I definitely think this is a nerf. I don't agree with it. Once again, I don't think that was the place to nerf Inquisitor. In fact, Inquisitor, although I don't play it often, is definitely one of my favorite ascendancies to watch people play, and I played it in the past myself. I think it's a very cool ascendancy. I just don't agree with it, man. I really don't. This is very disappointing. Very disappointing. Okay, so I think that about does it for the ascendancies. Now we can get into more item changes. So Dre's Elixir, aka Doedre's Elixir. So basically it got nerfed big time. So other than the variables here, what actually matters here is 1 to 3 minimum endurance charges, frenzy charges, and crit charges, power charges, during the duration of the potion. So if we open up Doedre's Elixir here, I got it pulled up. So now you now have a minimum, as far as I can tell. Instead of gaining, it now caps out as 3 power charges, frenzy charges, endurance charges with a max roll, meaning you can't scale cast on death. I think they're trying to target cast on death and remove the possibilities of you just one-shotting ultra-juiced uber bosses. I can understand why they nerfed it. I thought it was a pretty awesome build, and it's a very one-dimensional thing, and you can't really do anything else with it. So I thought it was very cool, very niche thing to do, but GGG disagrees. I could see why. But essentially, from what I gather there, that's what they're going to do. You're no longer gaining charges. You now have a minimum charge that you can gain the power from. Sorry for the repeated flashbangs. Up next, the physical damage taken from Soul Ring, this is actually Heartbound Loop, has been reduced from 350 to 100. So I think what they're doing here is they're trying to target Ward Loop and abusing this roll right here, 350 physical damage taken on minion death. That's now going to be reduced to 100. I personally don't play Ward Loop, so I don't know how big of a nerf this is, and if this bricks Ward Loop or what have you. Let me know down in the comments if you know how big of a deal that is for Ward Loop. Next up, Flesh Fusion Cobalt Jewels, aka Melding of the Flesh, resistance reduction changed from a fixed value to a percentage, which is the same as Destructive Light. That's Annihilating Light. So if we take a look at Melding of the Flesh, so it has a flat reduction of all elemental resistances at its current state. But what they're going to change it to is something like this, 70 to 60% reduced elemental resistances. This is going to reduce every single elemental resist you gain by 60 to 70%, which is definitely a nerf, but this is also one of the ones that I think a lot of people expected because Melding of the Flesh was so powerful and it was so easy to get your resist up. They're going to make it a little bit harder, but with things like Mage Blood, it's still going to be fairly easily doable, but they're making it a little harder to obtain, which I think honestly is reasonable. Melding was extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. Next up, we got Arash's Resolve Iron Flask. This is actually Olroth's Resolve Iron Flask. Added attribute potion duration decreased by 20 to 30%. So basically just reduced duration of Olroth's Resolve Iron Flask. Once again, targeting Ward Loop, I would assume. Okay, continuing on here, we got Dead Reckoning. Okay, they call it Death Reckoning. Dead Reckoning, added attribute, Summon Skeleton Mage, I would assume that actually is. It has a +1 second cooldown, which is on par with Dust Return Cobalt Jewel. So if we go over to Dead Reckoning, they're essentially going to add an extra thing here where it adds a 1 second cooldown to your Skeleton Mages. I personally don't play Mage or Necromancer or Minion builds, as I've said before, so I would assume that's a substantial nerf, but let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong, how big of a deal that one is. Up next, we got Phantom Sacred Shield. So this is Aegis Aurora, another big one that a lot of people were speculating was going to be nerfed. So the way it currently works is you regenerate energy shield instantly each time you block. That's equal to 2% of your armor. That is now going to be adjusted to After blocking, the energy shield recovery per second is obtained in the near future, and the value is equal to 2% armor. So essentially, you're going to regen that energy shield over a short period of time that's equal to 2% of your armor, and I would assume it stacks each time you block. But this is I think this is a pretty substantial nerf, because you can't just block 10 times, in 2 seconds and regenerate all your energy shield back every time, and you're just almost unkillable. I think this is really going to tone down how powerful Aegis Aurora is, and honestly, this is not surprising whatsoever. Most people were expecting it to be toned down. Up next, we got Dawnbreaker's Giant Tower Shield. So frost damage taken as fire. Basically every one of these right here, Dawnbreaker, 10 to 20 has been reduced 8 to 10. So they're cutting that in half. Now, I personally have never used Dawnbreaker before, but this thing looks pretty crazy, and I think they're trying to target, along with the lines of Melding of the Flesh and Aegis Aurora, they're really trying to target those max res, people trying to abuse that max resistance, right? And they just max out their fire resistance, I would assume, and use Dawnbreaker to cut down all of their elemental damage taken significantly by just focusing on max fire res. So that's what they're targeting there. Up next, we have a small change to Squire. All sockets are white has now been changed to socket color cannot be changed. So either it's going to now roll with colored sockets that can't be changed, or it's going to stay the same and you can't just, I've never even actually tried to use a chromatic orb on the Squire, but I would assume instead of being able to use a chromatic orb on it, you can't change the sockets. Hopefully they stay white, but if not, now you're probably going to have to look for one that has the proper colors that you're looking for, if that's what it entails with the change. We'll find out, right? Okay, so another pretty big one here, they're definitely targeting Omniscience on this one. The corresponding attribute increase of ultimate power, ultimate speed, and wisdom has been reduced from 8 to 4%, and the attribute increase, flat attribute increase of 40 has been reduced to 30. So if we open up our POB over here and we go over to Utmost Might, they're all the same here, either 40 and 8% strength, dexterity, or intelligence. This is going to be reduced to plus 30% strength and plus 4% increased strength. And that's going to go for Utmost Might. That's going to go for Utmost Swiftness and for Utmost Intellect. Definitely targeting stat stacking and Omniscience with this one. Once again, I don't think this is necessary, but GGG thinks otherwise. They're going to make their game how they want to make it, right? So a pretty decent size nerf there for those notables. But honestly, depending on the how min-maxed your build was when it came to Omniscience, at least, they weren't even the most powerful ones to begin with. So if you're playing Omniscience, I don't think it's that big of a deal at all. But if you're playing something like an int stacker, a strength stacker, a dex stacker, that one is going to hurt a little bit, right? That's pretty big for y'all. Okay, up next, we got Blessed Rebirth. This is one of the ones I'm not sure, since I haven't played minion builds, I can't really decipher, but it says Blessed Rebirth has been reworked. Now, minions have 20% max HP, 50% damage reduction for recently created minions. So obviously this is something that has to do with minions, and you give your minions 20% max HP and 50% damage reduction. That sounds good. That sounds like a buff, but I have no knowledge of minion builds whatsoever. So once again, let me know down in the comments what that actually means and if it's good or not. Okay, here's another one. Small clusters are getting a nerf. The mana reservation small clusters are getting a nerf, down from 6 to 4%, which isn't too big of a deal, but those builds that were already very, very, very tight on your mana reservation, we're talking, 1 or 2%. Now it's going to be even more difficult to squeeze those extra auras in. So a bit unfortunate there, especially with the state of defenses right now, how much you have to stack to actually stay alive and highly juice content unless you're just running a glass cannon softcore build. I think this is a bit unnecessary as well. I think it allowed a lot of cool aura stacking that could allow you to obtain pretty awesome amounts of tankiness, and now that's just going to make it harder, which not only are they nerfing damage for a lot of these skills, now they're taking down some of your tankiness as well, reducing speed. It's just, everything is just nerfed across the board at this point. I think this is unnecessary as well, but once again, they'll make their game how they want. This is, once again, another one that I have absolutely no idea what it's talking about. Enlightenment Stones effect increased by 60 to 70% while the potion is effect. No potion charge is obtained. So I have no idea what this is talking about. I'm sorry for my ignorance on this one, but I haven't used anything that I can think of that this is talking about. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, doing something to enlighten the skill gem, but it doesn't seem to be so unless they're complete. It doesn't say rework, so this has something to do with something completely different. I have no idea what it means, but while the potion is effect, no potion charges obtained, has been reduced to 30 to 40% from 60 to 7% while the potion is valid. And then the last very, very big one is Ashes of the Stars and Crystallized Omniscience, now only dropped by Uber Eater of Love Worlds and Searing Exarch. So this is a pretty massive one that I hope that if it isn't mentioned here, that the drop rate is increased slightly to reflect doing a much harder boss. I honestly agree with what they were trying to go for here, and they're actually making Uber bosses somewhat worth doing, right? But I think the amulets were just a tad too rare. I honestly, if they bumped it up to just 3% instead of 2 and moving this to Uber, I would agree. At 2%, I think it's a little too rare, but it's also, they're both also extremely powerful amulets, so I can understand why they keep it at 2%. But I honestly do agree. It gives people an actual reason to do Uber bosses, because before they were pretty much pointless, right? There was really no reason whatsoever to do an Uber boss other than try and get like your achievements or whatever. So I honestly think that's a good change there. I imagine it's going to be pretty split with the community on whether or not that was a good change, but that's just my opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own. All right, so that about does it for our review of potential balance changes coming in the next patch 3.19, or Lake of Kalandra as the new season is going to be known as. Let me know what you guys think of all of these changes down in the comments. Do you agree with the state of the game they are trying to achieve, which is reducing speed, nerfing everything down, and trying to really make the game harder in general? Or do you disagree, right? Do you think they should be nerfing more skills instead and trying to work on some build diversity and have more skills that are able to do higher end content? Me personally, I think I'm in the latter, right? I think the more build diversity in this game that is able to do higher end content, the better, because you feel less pigeonholed to play very specific skills that are actually able to do Uber bosses and able to do super juiced in-game content. You really feel like you have very little options, especially in the current state. They're only nerfing more, and that now the build of diversity every time you nerf is just going to become less and less. And then, honestly, that's very disappointing to me, but it is what it is. We'll see how it all pans out from the official release of the balance changes from GGG whenever that happens. But that about does it for me. Thank you for watching till the end. Like and subscribe if you like the video and want to see more content in the future. I'll see you next time. Thank you again.